Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, again, May 29th, 2023, Memorial Day. We're here. I'm not even supposed to be here, and yet I am here. We were all set to take a Memorial Day away from the microphone, and we will, but not before using up 1 hour of your life. That's the point, I think, of today. There was just too much happening over the weekend, and we've had this before. But I don't know, something about today moved Greg to say, actually a lot of things happened over the weekend, and it's hard to just walk away without doing a show at all, especially since he doesn't get back on until Wednesday. And so, the idea was born that we ought not to take a day off. That idea was actually born a long time ago. It's the days off, which are the new developments. Anyway, today being Memorial Day, we'll memorialize a few things that happened over the weekend, including, in Washington, I guess the biggest deal is the deal, I guess. I just wanted to say, I guess, the second time, but also a deal. I threw that in there as well. There's a preliminary deal, I guess is how you would describe it, in place as between Biden and McCarthy anyway. And now the question is McCarthy, the leader of the Republicans in the House of Representatives, or is he not? Will they buck the agreement? There's every chance in the world that the Freedom Caucus revolts, as they have said they are going to do, and refuses to endorse this agreement. But generally speaking, not really. They tend not to do that. And in a world where murdery Trader Green is on board with the Kevin McCarthy machine, it's entirely likely that she finds her way to bring this around. So, okay, Greg says it's a framework. It's an understanding. It's a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's not really there yet. We're also waiting to hear how Democrats will vote on it as well. They kind of want to be there in support of President Biden naturally. And they don't want to default, naturally. But, of course, there's going to be criticism of the deal no matter what happens, because that's one of the things that happens with deals, generally speaking. It is everything that people in the progressive world didn't want, in the sense that, yes, it freezes spending. Yes, that's essentially a cut. Yes, the most vulnerable will be the ones that bear the brunt of those cuts. On the other hand, I have also said, we'll give Greg a chance to interpret this as well. And I'm sure he's seeing much of the same thing. It's being said, certainly, that to the extent that there's a standard for Republicans in anything, this is sort of a standard House Republican budget. They cut back on these things. They do have a majority in the House. They probably would be able to get something that's not out of the ordinary through the Senate, possibly if the alternative is default, and we'll see kind of how it goes. But essentially, one way of looking at it is to say it's no more horrific than Republicans usually produce in terms of budgets, and then there's no default, and in the meantime, Kevin McCarthy squirms, and he has to worry about whether or not his Freedom Caucus weirdos are going to come along. So the most uncomfortable in all of this has still been McCarthy, and that's something maybe to take away, but no one can eat it, so I don't know how much they're going to appreciate it. Versus, say, some additional help with feeding their families. They won't care very much. All right. Well, Greg Dworkin is on his way in because there's that, and there's also news from outside of Washington, D.C. We did get a chance to mention what was happening in Texas at the end of last week, but Greg didn't get a chance to comment on our mention of what happened in Texas over the last week. So that's what we're here for. Happy Memorial Day. Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Hey, there's so much going on with that debt ceiling deal. I looked at it and said, boy, this, and then the Texas impeachment, that needs comment. But what really set me off and said, we got to do a show,
Okay.
is the news that came yesterday that Rules Committee is set to meet tomorrow, Tuesday at 3 p.m. And I thought to myself, being the normie person, Rules Committee, this is something we have to talk about.
They're going to meet tomorrow. I know I have to meet today. Great. Thanks, Rules Committee. Okay.
We have talked about the Rules Committee.
Sure.
And we talked about it in the proper context, which is to say it came up on the show, and this is David explaining to me what this committee's all about. When Kevin McCarthy won his vote to be the speaker, the price for him winning was giving up 3 of the 9 seats on that Rules Committee to the nut jobs.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I remember.
There's 9 Republicans on that committee and 4 Democrats.
All right. Yes.
And for those of you who missed that show, it's known as the Speakers Committee because the 4 are there because Hakeem Jeffries says he wants them there.
Yes.
And the 9 are there because Kevin McCarthy says he wants them. The Ringways are there because McCarthy appointed them.
Yes.
All right. But not all of the 9 are totally loyal to Sauron. It's weird because 3 of the 9 are wild cards, especially Thomas Massey.
Oh.
Because he's basically a hardcore old-style libertarian. He's House Freedom Caucus adjacent, but he doesn't really belong to the Freedom Caucus. He's just your basic right-wing nutjob before Trump.
Oh, all right.
Then you have Chip Roy and Ralph Norman, and they're MAGA nutjobs.
Okay.
They're already saying they're not voting
for
this
this deal. Chip Roy is a weird kind of guy, though. But yeah, okay.
Roy is I said this at the time. Roy is the one to watch because Roy is the one that won the speakership for McCarthy. He was one of the holdouts, the 20 holdouts. And Roy was the one who, quote, negotiated the deal, end quote, to bring some of those votes on board so that McCarthy had enough to put him over the top on what I can't remember now. It was like the 137th vote. Because McCarthy didn't win the first time. He kept losing, he kept losing, he kept losing. He kept running. There was nobody else. And then Roy brokered a deal. And part of the deal was to get himself on Rules.
Okay.
And we talked about this at the time and said, this is significant, except you're not going to see it until later. Now, a second thing about how the House works and the importance of the House is there's a lot of times where if nothing gets passed, who cares? You can have standoffs between the House and the Senate or, divided Congress and nobody can agree on anything. But there's a couple of things that have to pass. And at the top of the list is raising the debt ceiling, because if you don't do that, the world economy is destroyed. So that's sort of kind of semi-important.
Yeah, right. Fine, sure.
Right? After that, you could argue that the must-pass stuff includes the I don't remember how many there are, 12 or 13 different
it's been both.
Budget agreements.
Yes, right. Oh, appropriations bills.
Appropriations. But the truth is, if they don't pass, you just sort of like revert to where you are. So it's sort of important, but not nearly as important as the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is the one thing that is absolutely positively must pass. And the thing is, it doesn't
come up every year, but when it comes up.
But this deal took it off the table for 2 years.
See? All right.
So essentially, whatever the Republicans got, whatever it is, they gave up their hostage.
Okay.
They have nothing
for 2 years.
That's how you have to look at this deal.
I guess so. Yes. I mean, I'm trying to think. Can you? Well, I mean, I don't know what would happen. Oh no, it doesn't work the same way. I'm thinking like a crazy Republican. I'm sure they're walking around saying, "Can we repeal the debt ceiling? Can we offer legislation that would lower it?" And you can, but I mean,
Senate.
then if the Senate says no, then you're stuck with where it is. You could try, but
of course, I go back to Schoolhouse Rock. For a bill to become a law, it's got to be agreed on by both houses, and then the president has to sign it. So, like, what power do they have? You have no power here," said
Pretty much.
The good witch to the wicked witch.
I mean, that doesn't mean they won't try and do something dumb and do that, and then it doesn't
all
work.
noise.
But they walk around saying, we tried.
And that's the House Freedom Caucus. It's all noise. And the other thing that we learned from this is the House Freedom Caucus isn't all that big. I mean, Ralph Norman, one of the people on the Rules Committee, said, we've already got 11 to 15 people who said no. Mm-hmm. Well, so what?
Okay.
I mean, you got a bunch of Democrats, you got a bunch of Republicans, and if only 15 Republicans said no, this thing's passing.
Yeah, provided you can make up for it with Democrats, and that's what the deal's supposed to be able to do.
That's what the deal's supposed to be about. So we'll get to, the Democratic side of this.
All right.
But from the Republican side of this, they've basically started to negotiate from a weak position, didn't do themselves any favor, got a deal, basically gave up their hostage, and now they're trying to sell this Etzel to the Ford community, saying, look, this is Democrats gave up everything. I talked to Hakeem Jeffries, said Kevin McCarthy, lying through his teeth, because Hakeem Jeffries says we were about to hear it didn't actually happen. I talked to Hakeem Jeffries, and Jeffries said the Democrats got nothing. They gave up everything.
Yeah.
He told his conference.
Sure, why not?
So
Tell him whatever
what actually
it
happened.
takes to get him to vote for him. All right.
Well, here's a fact box from Reuters. What's in the debt ceiling deal struck by Biden and McCarthy? Basically a cap on discretionary spending for a couple of years. For the first year, nothing goes up. And for the second year, it goes up by 1%. But discretionary spending is only 7% of the federal budget. So whatever happens,
true, I guess.
It's,
That's
it's a deal.
much.
It's not that big a deal.
I guess, yeah. So a 1% increase on 7% of the budget next year.
In the second year. Mm-hmm. So McCarthy can say to his people, look, we forced them into cutting because with inflation, no change means a cut.
Right. That's funny because, of course, it used to be the Republican position that only in Washington would that be a cut.
Right. But that's what he has to sell.
Yeah.
That's the kind of sandwich he has to sell to his caucus. Fine. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's that. So that's in there. They cut some IRS funding. They moved some money back from COVID.
Great.
Yeah, they added some work requirements, but only for adults. They spared Medicaid. They spared doing anything for children.
Okay.
Because when you want to do things for children on the Republican side, it means you're trying to hurt them.
Yes. Okay.
That was taken out. Student loans weren't touched.
Oh.
And then there's some new rules to make it easier for energy projects, which is in shorthand Washington called energy permitting.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay. And they haven't nailed down the details there, and they've agreed that the details can come a little bit later. Although Joe Manchin snuck in something about getting approval for a pipeline in West Virginia, which is really interesting because it was a Democratic and not a Republican ask, and it takes it out of the Senate so that the Senate can't hold things up, which is probably why the Biden White House agreed to it.
Okay.
Right? Because if that ask were in the Senate, then the Senate could wrangle about whether or not we want to approve it. Republicans could say we're not going to approve it because Manchin's a Democrat, and so we'll hold everything up. All sorts of wacky things are not on the table anymore because the Biden White House put it here.
Okay.
So, look, the Biden White House did a really masterful job in negotiating this from a weak hand, and that's really what I want to get to.
All right.
Sahil Kapoor writes a comment from Representative Dan Bishop, one of the firebrands. If Speaker's negotiators bring back in substance a clean debt limit increase, one so large it even protects Biden from the issue in the presidential, it's war. That's what he said on May 27th.
War. Okay.
Okay. And Sahil Kapoor says, look, this gets to the core of the division.
Uh-huh.
House Republican hardliners see the debt limit not as a shared responsibility in divided government, but as a weapon to wield when a Democrat is president.
Sure.
Dan Bishop trashes a 2-year hike that protects Biden from the issue in the presidential. That's his concern. Mm-hmm. You've taken away my hostage. I'm really pissed. This means war.
With someone. We don't know
With
who.
somebody. But that's what he said. That's really what this is all about. And so, it's just pretty interesting to see that. The other hostage word was actually used by a Republican, Matt Gaetz, when he was describing, I don't like the deal because they're taking away our hostage.
Describing his date. Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
Here's Paul Krugman describing it. As of this AM, from what I read, it's Schrodinger's debt deal. Republican insistence on destructive work requirements could still kill the thing, but the numbers look much less awful than many Democrats feared. Why? I think three things. Basically, one, there's only a narrow Republican majority. Number two, a good chunk of the Republican caucus is nihilism. So they can't really agree on anything except no. And three, the existence of potential workarounds. And he's talking about the 14th Amendment and the platinum coin.
Okay.
Biden and company hate the idea, Krugman essentially writes in so many words. But the idea that they existed was important, and nobody thought that it was a good idea to use them. But essentially, they were a break glass thing. In case of House Freedom Caucus, break glass and use the coin.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to use, let's say, the 14th Amendment. You don't want that Matt Kaczmarek judge to be the one assigned to the case and have it held up in the courts and then go to this Supreme Court. God knows how they'd rule, because that would just make the markets crash and spoil the world economy, even if you declared unilaterally, yeah, I'm doing this. But the fact that you could do this, or that you had this, or maybe the platinum coin, or maybe something else in your back pocket, and said to the Republicans, don't go there. We have to negotiate on, we're not negotiating a debt ceiling. Debt ceiling is going to be raised. Everybody knows that. Don't try to push it to the edge, because if you do, we'll invoke this. Okay. We don't want to. We think it's a bad idea, but we'll do it anyway. Don't make me do this, but we'll do it.
Right.
And so, that was their main function. The 14th Amendment gets tied up in court. The platinum coin roils the markets. It's not a perfect solution. That's why they didn't go there. Biden's basically pretty conservative when it comes to his view of the role of the presidency. The role of the presidency isn't to break everything and start all over again. And so he's just not going to go there if he doesn't have to. But he would if he had to. That's the message.
Okay.
And the Republicans got that message. And so McCarthy was, working from a weak hand. He didn't have his entire caucus behind him.
Okay.
Conference.
Right. And he needs everyone. Conference for them.
He needs every single one of them. He didn't have them. And he still doesn't have them, which the Rules Committee sort of highlights. And then there's Josh Shooter, I guess from Brookings, I think, and was commenting on complaints on Twitter that Biden gave everything away. Biden gave away the store. And this one happens to be from Sarah Christofferson.
Okay. This is a complaint?
She writes, this deal is going to cripple Biden's presidency because now they know they can gore every sacred cow and Dems will fold. They've got us on the ropes.
Oh.
The dumbest people in America have got us on the ropes. And her looked at this and said, look, House Republicans got a little bit more from this deal than Democrats did, but I don't agree with this point of view. For one, the deal eliminates or ameliorates future hostage taking. The debt ceiling is lifted. The budgets are adopted for the next 2 fiscal years. And the deal ensures fewer high-stakes standoffs. And second, the deal undercuts reasons to oppose government spending. Now that Republicans have written the budget, they own it. If Republicans threaten a shutdown in September, they'll be standing in opposition to their budget that they wrote. It's a harder case to make to the American public. And this gives some insight into Biden's motive to cave on several fronts. Modest concessions in exchange for a weaker Republican House. Presidents are pretty weak in budget standoffs, he writes. Obama lost with budget caps. Trump lost with massive budget increases. Biden lost with modest discretionary cuts. In budget standoffs, it's often better not to control the presidency. And again, that's because this is a must-pass thing from the House, the one thing that the House has to pass. And so the House holds the cards in this one thing. And repeated standoffs would lead to more cumulative concessions. In this sense, limiting or undercutting future standoffs has a bigger payoff than any one-off capitulation. Other people have noted this too. Matt Grossman noted that. It looks bad now for Biden, but actually it's a win over time. The terms of the deal aren't great for Democrats, but Biden was never negotiating from a policy standpoint. You said this at the beginning of the show when you were summarizing the idea that, look, this is a Republican House. What do you expect from a Republican House?
Usually worse.
Biden was negotiating to get a weaker, less threatening House.
Mm-hmm.
He did. He won.
Okay.
Now, that's hard for congressional Democrats to swallow, given the price tag. But they'll have more leverage when they help appropriations bills over the line in the next couple of years.
We hope so.
So that's his point of view.
Okay.
And, I think that there's a lot to be said for that. I think that, to the extent that Biden has taken the worst of it off the table, it's a great thing.
Yeah, I don't see our way back to a debt ceiling crisis. I can't manufacture one. I mean, that doesn't mean there aren't other mini crises by comparison, things that are routine that we will see come up. And it is a good point that, yes, if Republicans were, say, to threaten government shutdowns by refusing to pass appropriations bills unless major cuts beyond these were imposed, it would be theirs. They'd have to own it, and they'd be working in opposition to their own budget. But yeah, I'm not certain that they care about that. But it's still, it's not the same kind of crisis. We have experienced those temporary and short-term and some long-term shutdowns in the past. And, it sucks, but it's also something that the Republicans have. This is maybe the first lesson I've ever seen them learn is they actually do know, these are generally bad for us. It hasn't stopped them from doing it yet. And some people have not quite learned that at least threatening the shutdown isn't good either. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them do it, if only because it'd be just incredibly dumb and they'd hurt themselves. Dumb. And that's what they like to do. You don't leave them around sharp objects. They are incredibly dumb, but McCarthy's not going to let them do that. And, there's enough people backing him, which I think we'll see on Wednesday, that, it's an empty threat. It's more noise than anything else. Mac Grossman, who is a institutionalist, says, look, even if it looks bad for Biden now, being extorted, unclear strategy or message on his part, it may be politically better long-term. Number one, deal-making, triangulation is very popular with the public. Number two, it takes dysfunction out of the news. Number three, it makes Republicans more irrelevant for the next 2 years. And number four, it actually moves public and elite opinion a bit left. Because if this is what they have, we don't want that. Okay.
So there's some benefit to it. There are other people who have said, messaging. You know what? Biden learned his lesson. And this was interesting. And this had to do with a comment that Matt Iglesias made. He said, I've had a number of senators say that, it's much easier to get stuff done with Biden than it was with Obama.
Oh.
And Mitch McConnell essentially had said the same thing. And here's how it goes.
All right.
McConnell said, Obama was about winning the argument. And Biden is about getting the deal. When you went in to negotiate with Obama, it would start, McConnell says, with him lecturing you about how your worldview is wrong, about how everything you do is wrong, you have the wrong politics, yada, yada. And you felt like you were being, pulled into the principal's office for a lecture. I hated it.
Too bad. But
with Biden,
correct.
He accepts that you guys don't agree on the politics, but doesn't necessarily say yours is bad, mine is good. He just skips that part and said, okay, so what can we do? It's just so much easier for me to deal with. I just prefer it.
Okay. I mean, I would prefer not to be told I was wrong, I guess.
Yeah. And the way that the senator said to Iglesias is that Obama always wanted to win the argument. Biden just wants to make the deal. It's a completely different point of view from the two. And Biden's way works. It's quiet. It doesn't look like he's getting stuff done, but he's actually getting stuff done. And Biden understands, probably better than anybody, talking about it in public. Why isn't he messaging it better? Why isn't he doing this? Why isn't he doing that? Why isn't he attacking the Republic? Because you actually get stuff done if you keep your mouth shut. And you do it in private. The way to cut deals is to not negotiate in public and not negotiate against yourself. Biden understands this better than anybody. And he gets it done.
All right.
And it doesn't make him look like a hero. He doesn't care. That's the point. Biden doesn't care about anything. He doesn't care about how he looks. He doesn't care if he gets criticized on Twitter. He doesn't care. He just wants to get the deal done. And he did, and it worked.
Interesting. I mean, it's funny because my memory of, maybe Obama was a different guy, and I'm sure, that's not unusual. A different guy in public than in private, but to start out with the lecture about how Republicans are wrong, and then he'd make a deal after all, and he'd come out and he'd say, well, Congress this and Congress that, and everyone would be begging him on the Democratic side, say it's Republicans. Why won't you just blame the Republicans? Apparently he does that in the meeting. And the rest of us get, well, Congress is going to XYZ. It's funny.
Well, yeah, again, just because they say it doesn't make it true. But, it rings true. Sounds truthy.
Okay. I mean, yeah, maybe that's a load of crap.
Maybe. But, these are accurate descriptions of what the people who were there are saying about how it went.
They just say it. We're just stenographers, man. We write it down. But then you say, also, at least you take the pause to say, that might not be true, by the way.
Yeah, but how do you know? We weren't there. You were there.
Yeah.
Anyway, fact is, Biden did get it done. And,
yes.
It's really not that bad a deal.
That's good news. Yeah.
Can you find things about it that you don't like? Yes, but the Republicans have the majority in the House.
Yes, that's ultimately what underlies this whole thing. So, okay, I mean, that's the initial read that I've been seeing, is that it's no worse than you'd usually get from the old not so crazy Republicans, just regular Republicans who are terrible because they're Republicans and they don't care about helping people.
They did a whole lot of noise and made everybody stare at them and think they're crazy. Right. And what did they get for it in the end?
They were crazy.
They've been defanged. Because the hostage is off the table, and again, you have to keep coming back to that because that's what actually happened. So here's the AP looking at the bigger picture.
Yes.
Debt ceiling agreement gets thumbs up from business groups and jeers from some on the political right. So if the political right hates it, we did something good.
Hey, Abby, I don't know. I think she's opposing it, or we can ask. Must be some unusual Memorial Day activity happening. Probably a parade going by. That's my best guess. A squirrel parade.
I think it's a raccoon on the deck.
Oh.
She's not happy about it.
Well, I agree, and it's all right. And, not that there's a raccoon on the deck. That's completely out of order.
Yeah, well, she'll take care of it.
Okay.
Anyway, here's some examples. I think it's a disaster, said Matt Rosendale, Republican, Montana. He was one of the holdouts of the 20 that kept McCarthy from being Speaker on the first vote.
So now you've heard his name. Mission accomplished.
The deal's insanity, tweeted Ralph Norman, Republican, South Carolina. A $4 trillion debt ceiling increase with virtually no cuts is not what we agreed to. Not going to vote to bankrupt our country. That's important because our next topic is the House Rules Committee,
right?
Which meets tomorrow at 3 p.m. and Ralph Norman is on the Rules Committee. So again, the committee, 9 Republicans and 4 Democrats, includes 2 of the most outspoken GOP critics of the bill, Chip Roy and Ralph Norman. As part of the deal to win the speakership, McCarthy agreed to appoint Roy Norman and Thomas Massie to the panel.
Right.
Again, Thomas Massie is not quite in the same category as Roy and Norman. Norman already signaled he'd vote against the rule. I just told you.
Really?
So now you have the situation of the Rules Committee and what it is and what it does. And this is where I'm real fuzzy and I need your help. But basically, the Speaker's Committee is there because they decide what goes to the floor. They decide the rule as to how things will work when that gets to the floor. For example, whether or not amendments are allowed, how long debate is, so on and so forth. Right. That's what Rules Committee does, right?
Yes. Right.
And when we say we're voting on the rule, that always has a capital R. Yes. And what that means is we have predetermined the features and the outlines of how debate will work, and that in and of itself will often decide what the outcome is.
Yes, that's true too.
And so the Rules Committee is like really super important.
Yes. They can reshape a bill that they don't like, that has reached them for some reason, and change the rules of debate such that it becomes almost impossible to Well, it's impossible to get around them. They can add things that weren't in the bill, and if the rule passes, this amendment is considered adopted and change the text of a rule.
So Joe
of a
Manchin
bill.
can get his pipeline.
Right, things like that. They can disallow certain amendments that are very popular so that nobody even gets a chance to amend the bill. They can force one through without a separate vote. They can change the text. All sorts of things.
So the whole thing about the speaker having incredible power because the speaker decides what goes to the floor is basically through the Rules Committee. And that means that the speaker appoints the 9 Republicans and the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries, appoints the 4 Democrats with the assumption that those people will vote the way the person who appointed you wants you to vote.
Yes.
And in this particular case, McCarthy essentially gave up a third of his power.
Yes, but again, you'll notice the numbers. It's 9-4, and it's not like that on any other committee. The structure of the committee is such that the speaker realizes, all right, every once in a while I'm going to lose somebody on something, but I'll build in a huge advantage for myself. And it's so huge that you could lose 2, 3, which is an unusual situation for him.
So let's talk about not the 9 ringwraiths to start with, but the 4.
All right.
Okay. So you have 4 Democrats. How normally do minority members of this committee vote? Typically, I would think they'd vote no, whatever it is.
Yeah, right. I mean,
but
if
did
you're
they
really
ever
at a
vote
loss.
yes?
From time to time. I mean,
from time to time. It's not normal, but it's time to time.
Yeah, occasionally, symbolically, if they've been shouting about the need for open rules and Republicans produce an open rule.
I want regular order.
They'll sometimes say, all right, I'll vote for this.
What do you mean by regular order? We mean it has to go through committees, and the committees decide things. That's not how Congress works these days.
Right. So,
but
it's more
so
regular.
Here's the thing. Okay, so McCarthy has his 6 people. I don't even know who they are. They're faceless. It doesn't matter. They're candidates in a box. They'll do whatever McCarthy says.
More or less.
6 votes. You have 13 people on the committee. You need 7.
Right?
Yeah. Where's the other vote going to come from? Is it going to be Massey? And that means 7 votes. Does that mean that the 4 Democrats plus the 2 Freedom Caucus people vote together and it's a 7-6 vote? Or
it can happen.
It could happen. Or is it going to be the Democrats decide to throw in with the speaker here because it's a deal that Biden negotiated, and they're not going to undercut Biden. So that makes it a 10-3 vote.
Okay.
Again, Thomas Massey's a wild card. What if he says, look, my House Freedom Caucus people are nuts. I'm voting with the speaker on this one. So then it's 11-2. My point is, this is going to pass the Rules Committee tomorrow, but we don't know if it's a 7-6 vote, an 11-2 vote, or something in between. And that's actually kind of interesting because that's not usually how it works, folks.
Right. So the
anything
House
wrong
Rules
with that
Committee,
analysis?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I guess I haven't been following what the people on Rules have been doing. Generally, you don't have to because it's formulaic. I know Massey's a weirdo. And Chip Roy is hard to predict because he sometimes does things that he's sometimes MAGA-ish and he's sometimes, no MAGA person would do or say that thing. What is he exactly? It's hard to figure him out.
Same with Massey. I mean, at times they put on their institutionalist hat. At times they put on their MAGA hat. You never know what they're going to do.
Yeah. I mean, they're different kinds of unpredictable.
Norman's a no.
He says so.
So does that mean it's 12-1?
No.
I mean, it's so weird here in terms of trying to game out what's going to happen. We know it's going to pass, but we don't know by what. And, then it gets even more interesting if you think of it this way. If it passes by more than 7, that is to say, if Massey or Roy vote yes, get it out of committee, endorsing, in effect, the speaker's negotiation of this, his leadership.
Yeah.
They own it.
I guess so.
Forever.
Yeah.
Well, when you had the chance to, buck the speed, you didn't. You coward.
I guess. I'm looking at the lineup of the committee. It's a collection of real luminaries. It's interesting. I mean,
besides the ones we mentioned.
Yeah, it's not. It's I mean, that's the thing about the Rules Committee. They wield an awful lot of power, but I guess that's often why you put. Sometimes you end up putting nobodies on there because they owe everything to all of their power comes from the speaker having picked them out of obscurity. But
right, they do nothing else.
No mention of the chair of the Rules Committee in this article so far. Tom Cole is the chair.
Yeah.
No one has mentioned him. Michael Burgess.
Well, Tom Cole's old style. It's hard to imagine he's going to vote no.
Guy
if the speaker voted yes.
Right. Difficult to imagine. Michelle Fischbach. I don't know these guys. Massey Norman Roy. Eric Houchin, Houchin, Indiana. And Nicholas Langworthy. Total nobodies from the Republican side. And, not super well-known Democrats either, although Jim McGovern has been there for a while and we know his name. And Mary Gay Scanlon, Joe Neguse, and Teresa Ledger Fernandez.
Interestingly, McGovern and Cole get along pretty well.
Yeah, probably.
They've been around for a while. It's not hard to find pictures of them smiling and shaking hands and greeting each other as the committee starts and so on and so forth.
Yeah, Cole may be able to pull McGovern in on it then if he needs a vote.
So
it'll be interesting.
So I think that, in fact, part one of interesting is how that committee vote goes tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then once they decide to put it on the floor with whatever rule the committee decides is going to happen, then the actual vote, and it has to be, as I understand it, 73 hours after the text of the bill came out.
Oh.
72 hours because McCarthy has a self-imposed rule that will always wait 72 hours so that my people have a chance to read it, assuming they can read.
Yeah, which is waivable, of course.
And then but he says he's not going to waive it. This is going to happen, so we can't do it sooner. And therefore, there was pressure to get the deal done over the weekend because he won't waive that rule. And given the fact that you have to wait 72 hours, it can't be voted on until Wednesday, and the deadline's going to be this weekend. And so, yada, yada.
Well, they wouldn't be interested in waiving it because they're not here. They need those 3 days to get people to return to Washington.
And then after the 72 hours, as I understand it, you have to have an hour to consider the bill.
Yes.
So it's really 73
the default
hours.
rule at minimum. Yes. All right. Yeah. So, and you'll need an hour to consider the rule as well.
Yeah.
So
it's 72 hours plus.
Yes.
So that means that if they if they got the text at 8 p.m., that means that it's going to be a late vote on Wednesday.
Okay.
Right? You can't do it why don't they do it at 10 a.m.? They can't. They have to wait 73 plus hours. So it's going to be an evening vote, I presume.
That's a good guess. I mean, I guess if they get word that all the members are going to be back in town, again, the Rules Committee can do weird things like, if upon
we
adoption
say that
of the
72
rule
equals 60 in this particular case.
Sure, right? Why not? Or they just waive
we deem it
rule
so,
or whatever. Or,
it's a demon rule.
Yeah. So they can do whatever they like, but if they want 3 days, fine. If they're only coming back for this one thing, they can handle one evening vote. Then they all go out to dinner and have fundraisers or something.
Fine. So then on Wednesday, presumably Wednesday evening, but maybe Wednesday afternoon, then the part two of the interesting vote comes. Mm-hmm. If Nancy Pelosi were Speaker, and the Democrats needed 80 votes to pass this thing, she'd have 81.
Yeah.
And everybody else would be able to say, I voted no, and, I will never support the idea of work requirements and all these drastic things that Republicans like to do. I can't support this. Fine. So long as you have your 81. Hakeem Jeffries is the new kid. He's very talented, but this is his first big vote. So the question on the table is going to be, how many Democratic votes are needed? We don't know that yet. And whatever that number is, does Hakeem do that plus one, or does he say, you know what, Democrats as a whole are going to do it. It's going to be unanimous, and, screw the House Freedom Caucus. They have no power. You have no power here, said the good witch to the wicked witch. Go away.
Yeah.
I mean, so how is that going to play out, and that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, you will have
What would
to
you
wait
do
and see.
if you were Speaker? How many of your Democratic colleagues would you allow to vote no? None
I
of
don't
them?
know.
All of them? I mean, how do you do this?
I mean, they're not needed, really.
So, if you have a big vote, does that help to neuter the House Freedom Caucus and send them a message? What do you do with the vote?
I don't know. I mean, I guess you'd have to talk to the Republican whip and see what they have to say. They'll lie.
Yes. So one of the things that has happened over the past 24 hours, remember I told you that Kevin McCarthy said that Hakeem Jeffries told him the Democrats got nothing. Hakeem Jeffries said, here's what actually happened. We haven't spoken in days.
Okay.
We haven't spoken at all about anything. And that means that Hakeem Jeffries hasn't said to Kevin McCarthy, all right, you have 81 votes you need from me. I will line those. He doesn't know.
Yeah.
Assuming that's true. It's probably not true. But, assuming that's true, that would be the case. It's probably not true, and they probably have been talking, or at least their aides have been talking, so they have some idea of how many votes they need.
Yeah. All right.
The thing is that Republicans are terrible vote counters. They're not Pelosi.
That's
and
true.
we don't know how good Hakeem Jeffries is because he hasn't proven himself yet.
Well, we do get a chance to find out now. And, yeah, you're probably right about the timing of the vote. I just checked in on the Democratic whip's notices for the week has the last votes around 8:30 on Wednesday. So, yeah, probably the only reason they'd be doing that at 8:30 is waiting around to meet that 72 hours, plus 1 hour for the rule, plus 1 hour for the bill. Well, I guess I think they can pass the rule inside of the 72 hours if they can get people to agree to vote. But it's usually just the 1 hour right before the debate anyway.
So first you pass the rule, then you pass the bill?
Yep. Yeah.
So there's two votes.
Yes.
And
Usually
the first
that's
one
the minimum.
is the test vote.
Kind of. I mean, that's sort of what people will refer to it as. But yeah, the rule will set the parameters for debate of the bill. They'll debate the bill while they're debating the rule. Of course, people will speak to that. But the rule gets an hour of debate, and then you pass the rule, and then the rule says there'll be 1 hour of debate on the bill, or 5 hours of debate on the bill, 10 hours, whatever the number is that they come up with. Usually a minimum of an hour is the minimum that they give for things like this. For anything, unless they suspend the rules, those suspensions bills are 40
It's
minutes.
the Rules Committee. They can suspend the rules.
Right. Well, they don't need
That's
them.
it right there in the name of the committee.
Yeah. It's called the suspension committee, but they have nothing to do with that part. The suspension of the rules, although they just steer things that they don't want to deal with that way. Non-controversial bills that they think can pass with more than 2/3 of the House voting for them, they shuttle that way. And then they don't have to write a rule. It's a way of saving ink, I guess. But, yeah, okay. So it'll be Wednesday evening that they'll do it, and then we find out at that point how many Democrats are released. And if the vote takes longer, if they keep the vote open for a while and it goes past 15 minutes, that's both leaders wrestling with holdouts, trying to find the 218th.
Although we'll know that because C-SPAN will have a count right there on the screen.
And
they don't do it with
happening.
the Senate, but they do it with the House. Don't ask me why.
Yeah. All right. It's too easy to, I guess, identify who's the holdout in the Senate, and they don't want anybody to know that. I don't know why.
But with a House vote, you can see it right on the screen.
You can see at least the numbers.
Left to vote.
Yeah, you can't see who because there's.
You can see who, but you can see how many.
It's like trying to figure out which representative in New Hampshire did it. I don't know. It could be anyone. Okay. Well,
they don't have that problem with the New Hampshire House because it's like the entire state.
Right. It's just someone from New Hampshire is getting in the way. I don't know who it is. It doesn't matter. It's your neighbor.
Right.
The mailman won't vote yes.
Right. Well, it's Jared Golden. You don't even have to know.
Oh, okay. Right. Well, here in our house, yes. Up in New Hampshire, I guess, could be anybody.
Yeah, from Maine
right.
or whatever, So
that guy's not even
anyway,
from
so
here. He's from
I just
Maine.
think this is all fascinating, and it's got nothing to do with the fact that it's a deal. The deal's going to pass, But how it passes is going to say a lot about McCarthy's ability to steer anything in the future. He's already neutered his own party. And how much is he going to neuter himself? The next thing on the table there is, okay, does any of this mean that motion to vacate, which we also talked about at the time that McCarthy was made Speaker, because we knew it was going to come up. It only takes one person. It only takes a Ralph Norman to bring it up. But will they? Probably not. Because, what's the point if you're not going to win?
Yeah. And, in order to know if you're going to win, they have to count votes. And if they find somebody who can count votes, that guy should be the Speaker.
Yeah, exactly, because they don't have anybody on their side who can do that. So I'm not so worried about McCarthy losing his speakership that way. And after all, they don't have anybody else to put there. Who are they going to put? Patrick
no
McHenry?
one wants it. Yeah.
It isn't going to be Jordan. Jordan already says he doesn't want the job, and nobody wants him to have the job, so it ain't going to be him.
Okay. He's every other job in the place. He can't. He's no time for it. All right. Well, maybe something.
Anyway, that's why I had to talk about it. This is what was bothering me from the time that I heard about that committee vote on rules. And of course, as you know, this show functions as therapy for me, so I get to say what's on my mind, so it doesn't bother me the whole rest of the day.
That's what we're doing here on Monday, so you can have the rest of the day to barbecue or whatever.
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay. I understand you were similarly disturbed about not having a chance to talk about the impeachment of the Attorney General in Texas.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that?
It's just a fascinating thing. I mean, let's set the stage here.
Tell me about Ken Paxton's childhood.
Ken Paxton is not a good person.
That is
But he hasn't been a good person for years. He's been under indictment.
Yes.
The question on the table is, why now? So there was this fascinating article I came across. You got to ask Texans about this.
Okay.
So the Texas Observer's Nancy Goldstein has a nice essay called Paxton is Burning. Right? Remember the old Paris is Burning?
Oh, okay. Here we are. All right.
Has accountability
what
finally come to Texas? No.
Okay, I believe
Was
that.
yesterday's performance by the Texas House of Representatives intended to restore public faith in the body's commitment to the rule of law? Separate the good cops from the bad cops in the GOP? Prove a legislature that spent a year cravenly ignoring the pleas of Uvalde victims' relatives for common sense gun laws before rejecting them outright while rushing through an attempt to put the Ten Commandments in every classroom? Not really the 10th circle of hell? If so, the hearing leading up to a 121-23 vote to impeach Attorney General Ken Paxton for corruption was an epic fail. What the public saw, regardless of the lawmakers' intentions, were the opening fissures that have more to do with pride and power than justice. It's a cross between the state's largest intra-party catfight and its most public self-inflicted gunshot wound. As the bad blood between Ken Paxton and Texas House Speaker Dade Phelan, who serve as proxies for Trump and Republicans trying to distance themselves from Trump, finally spilled out in the open. And that's really the key to what's going on here. The Texas House Speaker, Dade Phelan, who has support in the House, hates Paxton and hates Trump. And Ken Paxton is MAGA in every sense of the word. He's the most MAGA attorney general in the country, state level. Okay. And he's the one that always sues the Biden administration over this, that, or everything else, and then gets this stuff, put before Matt Kaczmarek in Texas. So MAGA world loves him. And Dade Phelan, Texas House Speaker, hates him.
Okay.
So the lineup featured, on the one hand, GOP representatives who suddenly had a lot of worries about due process, precedent, and evidence that had not been evident while banning abortion, stripping transgender youth and their families of access to health care. And I watched some of the proceedings because the Dallas Morning News had a live feed. And the trouble with the Dallas Morning News live feed, it was even worse than C-SPAN because they didn't have any names of anybody speaking. So if you didn't know the players, all you knew is how they look. Right? There was bald guy who was defending Paxton. There was handlebar mustache guy who was the chair of the committee who was impeaching him, who looked like he stepped right out of Tombstone. that he could have been played by Val Kilmer. I mean,
Right.
it was great stuff, great visual, but you had no idea who they were. And so you had to go and find the Texas Reporter feeds to, get everybody's names.
Huh.
Right? You had the old guy who was, rolled out of the closet to say, this is not how it worked in 1917 when we did this, and it didn't work in 1975. You're not following the rules and precedent about how we usually did. And the very patient House Committee chair said, well, the rules were different then, and they were different circumstances. For example, one time we're talking about a former governor who wasn't in power. Another time we're talking about impeaching a judge in a single county. The rules are different. The rules are different now. You can't compare what we're doing now to what they did then. And the rules of the House have changed since then. So if your complaint has nothing to do with defending his actions and only has to do with process, the process is different because the circumstances are different. Simple as that.
Okay. Seems
and
easy.
that took like 3 hours to discuss.
Oh. Well,
because they kept bringing it. Well, I don't like the process here. You weren't open about it. We didn't have enough time. Does that sound familiar? It sounds like the House talking about a bill. We didn't have enough time to read it. We didn't have enough time to consider this. You weren't open enough about it. You did the investigation in secret. You didn't call witnesses. The reason they didn't call witnesses is because by Texas standards, if the committee calls a witness, they have to offer them immunity. And they didn't want to do that.
Oh. Okay.
This was all explained carefully by the head of the committee. It was really a fascinating discussion about process. And at least the head of the committee had a pretty good feel for process. Now, he was clearly an ally of the Speaker, Dade Phelan, and on the side of the I wish Trump would go away faction.
Okay.
And that faction was fairly large given the size of the vote. This is a Republican House with Democrats voting with the Republicans here. So it was a 121 to 23 vote. Only 23 Republicans were so MAGA that they refused to discuss Ken Paxton. And the only reason to support Ken Paxton, given everything he's done, which is a lot of bad things, including accusations that he paid his mistress to move closer. Sounds like Tennessee, right? That he paid his mistress to move closer to Austin, that he did favors for a businessman who did a lot of things in return for Paxton, including hiring his mistress. There's a whole lot of stuff there that was brought out. And there were 23, only 23 people supported him and said, we don't really care what Ken Paxton did. He's on our side.
22
which
of
is
them
essentially
were
what
mistresses.
Ted Cruz and Donald Trump said. And Trump was agitating for the Texas House to vote for Paxton and not impeach him. And Ken Paxton was accused during the discussion of calling Texas lawmakers and threatening them if they voted against him.
Nice.
And that was brought up in public in the House. And I saw that and said, you know what? That's how they should handle Donald Trump. If Trump threatens you, you ought to get there in public and say, Donald Trump just called to threaten me. It's not going to change my vote.
Hey,
you keep doing that, he'll stop doing it.
Maybe. I don't know. They keep catching him on tape doing these things.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
you might as well.
It's different when he does it, in person.
Oh.
But if he does it privately, that's why the Raffensperger phone call that Trump made was so much bigger than anything he said in public, even though it was the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, tape everything with him. That's lesson number one.
Right.
And I guess tape everything with Ken Paxton, too. He's that kind of person.
Right. So various media outlets and few of Paxton defenders have made much of the lightning speed of this past week. But while it may have been mere days between the Republican-led General Investigating Committee's announcement and their unanimous vote to introduce 20 articles of impeachment to the full House, Paxton's been under felony indictment for securities fraud since he became Attorney General in 2015. In fact, the FBI has been investigating Paxton on allegations he used his office to benefit a wealthy donor, Nate Paul, since 2020. And only in February of this year did the Department of Justice take over the probe. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot going on there.
Yes, I would say so. And
so Paxton, likely knowing Phelan was going to try to gloss most recent disgusting legislative term by ending it on a high note, Paxton called on Phelan to resign, saying he came to work drunk all the time. I mean, this was like amazing stuff. This was like, all personal, all petty, everything about Republican politics, laid out there. And it had nothing to do with high-minded, large number of people decided they were doing the right thing.
Oh. Well, now, I figured there was something like that happening.
He's not leaving. He's temporarily removed from office until it goes to the Senate. Again, the House impeaches. The Senate has the trial.
Yeah, but he's temporarily removed during trial.
He's temporarily removed during trial.
Okay.
However, when it comes to trial, and that hasn't been set yet, a couple of things to remember.
Yes.
The guy leading the trial will be Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, total MAGA guy.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the senators who gets to vote on whether he's guilty or not is his wife.
But
who
aren't they
said
voting?
she'd recuse herself, and there's no rules about that.
All right, but aren't they also voting on what he was doing with his mistress? I mean, that's interesting too.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'll be very interesting, won't it?
I was guilty on that one, but everything else not guilty.
Okay, and at least two others are associated with Paxton either because they also were involved with the same things he's being indicted for or something or other.
Wow.
So, the expectation from the Texas people is that, he's not going anywhere. Huh. Justin Miller writes, Paxton impeachment now in the hands of upper chamber where 3 senators have connections to the matter. His wife, Angela Paxton, Brian Hughes, who is alleged to have lent his name to an AG opinion request that aided Nate Paul, the rich guy who hired the mistress, and a senator who formerly employed Paxton's mistress.
Mistress.
I mean, this is Texas.
Great.
This is like what's going on here. And so, how could you not comment on that?
No way around it on that one.
Texas Tribune. All eyes on Senator Angela Paxton as Texas Senate takes up her husband's removal. Angela Paxton did not respond to a request for comment. All eyes are now on her to see how she handles this awkward moment with her colleagues. On the campaign trail, it says, she's known for performing a version of an Al Dexter song, singing "I'm a pistol-packing mama and my husband sues Obama." Mm-hmm. Now that pistol-packing mama is one of 31 senators who hold her husband's fate in their hands.
Yeah. All right. Well, good luck.
So there you had it. So, not
what does the
quite as
sing?
Interesting as, the debt deal, but pretty interesting in its own right.
I guess so. I would say, yes, 2 major stories, certainly. I love the aspect of the wife being a senator, but his facing charges for having, favoritism for his mistress, etc. That's going to be real interesting. Pistol packing mama. All right.
And Trump says, I don't want this done. I don't want this done. And the Texas House said, no, we're doing it.
Yeah. All right. Well, Trump was busy with a golf
loyalty
tournament
to
over
our
the weekend
speaker
anyway.
is greater than loyalty to some guy who's already indicted for a bunch of other stuff, and who knows.
All right. Yeah. Well, we've covered our 2 major topics, our 2 big goals for the day. I have consulted with Justice, who says no hard deadline on our getting the hell out of here. But if we want to wrap up for the day,
yeah, we should go.
We should do that. And they'll play
Usual
the outro
time. This is
music.
About when the music would play.
Yeah, right. So why don't we say we'll play that music? I hope everybody enjoyed being able to tune in for an hour. Now it's time to go. I don't know, get the grill ready, go to brunch or whatever. Or if you're working for the day,
feels like a normal show.
Start grumbling. Yeah, right. It's no different for you. To me, it's a vacation.
Yay.
And, I've got some memorializing to go do. And Eagle Scout number 2 is over there taking care of the memorial activity right now. I'm going to go and observe that.
Yes.
And wrap it up for the day. And we'll be back. I'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday. Joan McCarter will have to be reminded that it's not Monday if she takes today off, so that we can check in with her about the debt ceiling deal. We'll, I think, probably have no more clarity on the vote count until Wednesday when they're actually voting. So
right, but when I come
well
back on Wednesday, we'll at least be able to talk about what Rules Committee did.
That's true. Right. They will have met, and then we'll be able to predict what will happen at about 8:30 p.m. that night. And then Thursday, you get to come back and find out if you were right.
Yeah.
Pretty
Take
good.
Care. Talk to you.
All right. Thanks for coming by today.
Thanks for having
Hope
me
you're
on.
feeling well now. Okay. Time for us to wrap things up. You know what? I'm not 100% certain what is on tap in between now and 11 o'clock when the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is set to kick off. But that's the excitement of Netroots Radio. Stick around and find out.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Right, that's pretty much it. Okay, Greg had fun, you had fun, I had fun, and we get out of here an hour earlier. That seems like a good idea. We'll wrap it up. See you again tomorrow for a visit with Joan McCarter and figure out what's going to happen for the balance of the week on this new deal. See you then.